On this episode of China Uncensored, how to succeed in China without really trying. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Loyal viewers, you know that I'm not one to toot my own horn, but after my recent raging success in Hong Kong, I've decided to take the show to a new level. Go for some real mainland stream appeal. That's right. Like many noble Western enterprises before me, China Uncensored is going into the Chinese market. If you're wondering how a show about uncensoring China gets past the Chinese censors, well, I figured all that out. China Uncensored isn't going into China as a show. It's going in as a successful Western business looking to sell our proprietary secret humor formula to the Chinese market. It's a perfect plan. I came up with it after reading this handy How to Do Business in China guide that I found on the internet. According to the guide, Western businesses are the most highly respected in China, and Western businessmen are welcomed with open arms. Step 1. Come up with a China-friendly business name. Done and done. Step 2. Set up multiple unlimited personal expense accounts and open tabs at the best karaoke bars in Beijing and Shanghai. Wow, I guess people in China still love that karaoke. But why are there quotation marks around karaoke bars? Anyways, that shouldn't be too hard. What's that, Shelley? Now might not be the best time to go do business in China? Why? It looks like the past few months have been pretty hard for Western companies in China. Surprise early morning raids, investigations, fines. Western companies are becoming victims of a growing anti-monopoly campaign by the Xi Jinping regime. At least 30 foreign firms have been hit. Some of the bigger ones include Microsoft, JP Chase, and British pharmaceutical company GlaxoSmithKline. Now, the Chinese regulators say they're invoking a 2008 anti-monopoly law, but the general feeling among these companies and with business groups like the U.S. Chambers of Commerce in China is that these investigations don't have much to do with the law. So why is this happening to Western companies now? What's that, Shelley? Look at step 3. Okay. Step 3. Develop the right guanxi. Of course, guanxi. Just like Chinese politics, Chinese business is controlled by the big G, guanxi. Guanxi describes the personal relationships you have. When it comes to doing business, it's your personal network, the people you've done stuff for, or who you can call on to do you a favor. If you have good guanxi, you have it all. Sure, for the best guanxi, you might have to grease the wheels with bribery every now and then, take a few kickbacks, look the other way from time to time, but that's just how business gets done in China. So are these Western businesses getting in trouble for bribery and corruption? Actually, no, which is the interesting part. They're getting in trouble for things like pricing violations and market dominance. There are all kinds of theories out there about why this is happening. To protect domestic Chinese firms or for price control in politically sensitive industries. There's speculation that Chinese officials will increasingly use these regulatory tools that are common in other countries to control markets to their advantage in China. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce released a report that made it clear they had no idea what was going on. Now, I'm sure there's an element of truth to all those theories, but they're missing the bigger picture. And here's the missing piece of the puzzle. Many of the foreign companies being targeted had close ties to Jiang Zemin, the former leader of China and head of a political faction embroiled in a life-or-death struggle with Xi Jinping. I've already reported extensively on the aims of Xi's anti-corruption campaign that's just so happened to have targeted the most elite of Jiang's faction. This anti-monopoly campaign is just another front in Xi's war against Jiang Zemin and his political allies. It aims at taking out their financial backing, and Western companies are unknowingly caught up in the middle of it. Let's look at Microsoft. In 2007, Bill Gates was quite optimistic about how things were going for Microsoft in China. Bill Gates first visited China in 1994 and met with then-leader Jiang Zemin. It did not go so well. Jiang told him to learn more about Chinese culture, which was a not-so-subtle diss. Gates tried again in 1995, this time bringing his wife and Warren Buffett. Jiang invited them to a resort and, according to Chinese media, gave Gates some fatherly advice. By February 2003, Gates and Jiang had a much closer relationship. At a widely publicized meeting, they talked for over 45 minutes over the scheduled time and chatted truly like friends about their kids. At one point, Gates tried to explain the stock market to Jiang and called him a great capitalist. Speaking of the kids, Jiang's son, Jiang Mianheng, eventually got into the Microsoft business as well. He owns 50% of MSN China's website through his company Shanghai Alliance Investment. Other connections between Jiang's faction and Microsoft: China's state-run National Petroleum Corporation, which was chaired by the now-purged Zhou Yongkang, used Microsoft email service but was switched to a local provider earlier last year. That was after almost 100 investigators made a surprise early morning visit at 4 different Microsoft offices in July, asking for contracts and financial records, emails, communications, and then accused them of a $140 million tax evasion. A consulting firm from Microsoft in Dalian, once a stronghold for the Jiang faction, was also raided. I'm not saying that all of Microsoft's success in China was due to Jiang's influence. Microsoft also had to cut their prices down to the bone, like offering a $3 version of Windows plus Office to students, looking the other way on piracy, and giving deals to the Chinese government on software. Microsoft is often considered a China success story just because they bungled it so badly when they first entered the market, then managed to turn it around. But like many Western companies, they are still in the dark about how things truly work in China. Sure, Bill Gates has met with Xi Jinping. He used to meet with Hu Jintao too, another rival of Jiang, and even had Hu over for dinner at his house. But it's not like in the US, where you can meet with George W. Bush and then 4 years later meet with Barack Obama, and that's totally normal. Because of this whole concept of guanxi, Western companies are in far deeper than they ever realize. Bill Gates can be sitting across from Xi Jinping thinking, great, I'm meeting with the Chinese leader. That'll be good for business. While Xi is thinking, you got into China thanks to my arch nemesis. Basically, Gates is never going to be able to wash that Jiang right out of his hair. It's similar with other companies. Qualcomm is a California-based telecommunications company. Between 2012 and 2013, right before the beginning of the spectacular fall of the Jiang faction, almost half of its revenue came from China. They had a hard time getting into China initially, so in the late 90s, they were able to get Bill Clinton to personally talk to Jiang Zemin about how great they were. Now, anti-monopoly investigators have hit them with heavy fines and forced them to lower licensing fees. The auto industry has also been turned on its head. Jiang first rose up the ladder in the state-owned First Auto Works group in Changchun. His son, again Jiang Mianheng, sits on the head of China's other auto giant, the Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation. They have joint ventures with General Motors, Volkswagen Audi, and through subsidiaries, Mercedes-Benz. 50 FAW executives have been investigated in Xi's anti-corruption campaign, and all those foreign car companies tied to the SAIC are getting investigated left and right, and some fined for price fixing. But Xi's assault on Jiang's faction isn't just hitting foreign companies through the anti-monopoly campaign. Even the departments in charge of the anti-monopoly campaign have been hit. There are 3 agencies responsible for the investigation, and 2 of them were cleaned out before the anti-monopoly investigation began. These agencies, formerly the guardians of the Jiang's faction's wealth, are now attacking it. So the moral of the story is, be careful who you establish guanxi with. Jiang and his crew were always pretty bad news, but they controlled power for years. And with the way the Communist Party works, it's hard to align yourself with someone who isn't at risk. Ask Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who met with a charismatic Chinese leader named Bo Xilai right when it was obvious that he was about to get purged. Oops. That's why when China Uncensored goes into China, I'm not going to make that kind of mistake. I'm going to establish guanxi with the one guy no one in the Communist Party can purge. I'll even let him call dibs on my favorite karaoke song. Again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.